Live from the world headquarters of RT America in our nation's capital, this is the news with Rick Sanchez.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rick Sanchez, and I want to welcome all of you who are watching us from all over the world, including those of you who are cool enough to use your phones to watch us using the portable TV app. So here is the big story today. It's about that guy right there. See him? Yep, that is the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. I know you've probably heard a lot about him. To say that Mohammed bin Salman is controversial and infamous would be an understatement, a huge understatement from a global standpoint. We're going to get into the why of that in a report that we're going to be putting together for you throughout the day. But first, I want to talk about why he is in the news particularly, and it's this. It seems that he has been demoted. He's gotten a demotion of sorts, and here's how. President Joe Biden, the new president of the United States, intends to recalibrate the United States' relationship with Saudi Arabia by going around him, bin Salman, and dealing instead directly with his dad, King Salman. That's right. Now, I want to show you how we got to this place by putting this map here so you can see it. This is how we got here. And it has to do with this entire region, because this is going to affect what this that I just told you about bin Salman being kind of demoted is going to affect this entire region. And let me begin, if we can, with Israel. Now, Israel traditionally, right, has been the outcast in the Middle East, and certainly not on good terms with practically every single Arab country that is in this region, right? But under President Trump, because of the Crown Prince's personal relationship with Jared Kushner, President Trump's son-in-law, Saudi Arabia and Israel have become, well, practically allies. Why? Again, because Jared Kushner also has a very personal relationship, to say the very least. He's like an uncle to him, with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, right? So he worked to bring both sides together by promising that the United States would take sides with them, these two countries, Saudi Arabia and Israel, together against who? You guessed it, Iran. So there's big bad Iran, who both the Saudis and the Israelis equally despise. And that's the deal. Now, it's a good deal for the Saudis, and certainly for the government of Israel, and certainly for Bibi Netanyahu, it would seem. But is it good for stability? Is it good for the region? Is it good for the long-term goals of the United States? And should the United States allow its hand to show its hand so openly by choosing sides in conflicts that could later blow up, forcing us to suddenly have to get involved in another conflict in this region? These are questions, important questions. These are the important questions that we're going to try and tackle for you with a series of reports and analysis as we drill down here on the News with Rick Sanchez, where we believe it's time to do news again. And here's our list of the questions we think you'll be asking tomorrow after watching our newscast today. What message is President Biden really sending to Prince bin Salman? How does the historic relationship between Saudi Arabia and the U.S. impact us today? And how did North Korean hackers make off with more than $1 billion? All right, we're going to have team coverage on this story. We have a report that's going to try to explain what you need to know about Saudi Arabia, which is geographically and literally the Mecca of the Muslim religion, but also one of the most important countries in the entire world economically. And then there's the Crown Prince, who's getting the message today, not even from the President of the United States himself, but rather from his press secretary, Jen Psaki, that he's now possibly a persona non grata with the United States and the Biden administration. You know what? Let's start there. Here now is RT correspondent Alex Mihailovich.
He's been a controversial figure in world politics the past few years, to put it mildly. A relatively unknown Saudi royal, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman showed up on the radar when his father, King Salman, ascended to the throne in January 2015. A couple of months later, 29-year-old Mohammed bin Salman, commonly known as MBS, became Saudi Arabia's defense minister. By 2017, King Salman broke royal custom and named Prince Mohammed as Crown Prince. Since gaining power in any capacity, MBS has been subject to some praise as well as plenty of criticism. One thing he's blamed for by many is the devastating war in Yemen.
Unanimously, the United States Senate has said that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is responsible for the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. That is a strong statement.
And then, of course, there's the gruesome murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, which many believe MBS masterminded, including the U.S. Senate, which passed a resolution in 2018. At home, Mohammed bin Salman is accused of being behind the arrest of family members and a crackdown on Saudis who oppose him. On the bright side, some credit the prince for helping improve relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel. While Saudi leaders have publicly ruled out forging ties with Israel before a Palestinian state is created, in the same breath, they've praised the normalization deals between the Jewish state and Gulf Arab states. It is thought that a secret meeting happened between MBS and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Saudi Arabia to discuss relations between the two nations. Another positive notch on the prince's belt is the much-heralded Vision 2030, an ambitious plan to diversify Saudi Arabia's economy away from oil and stimulate its private sector. Some also give him credit for allowing women to drive in Saudi Arabia for the first time. While there was much hoopla about the move, many women say little has changed.
There's really an atmosphere of fear under MBS. There are no real reforms.
Ultimately, it can be argued that there have been more bad things said than good about Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And it seems that the new government in the United States has taken note.
We've made clear from the beginning that we're going to recalibrate our relationship with Saudi Arabia, and that President Biden, and one of the questions there was also, just to go back to the context of it, whether he would be speaking with MBS. And part of that is going back to engagement counterpart to counterpart. The president's counterpart is King Salman.
From all indicators, the so-called recalibration seems to aim to remove MBS from the mix. For RT, I'm Alex Mihailovich.
And now let's do this, because we think this story is important enough. Let's look at Saudi Arabia itself, a country that has been often referred to by New York Times columnist Thomas Friedman as the United States personal gas station, which is why it's, by the way, so coveted by the United States and the West and the UK. Covering this story for us, or this part of the story, is RT Boom Bust host Ben Swan.
Well, Rick, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia was first established all the way back in 1932, and its relationship with the United States dates all the way back to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And yet at the core of the relationship between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia has always been about one word: oil. The relationship between the U.S. and the Saudis began around World War II, when the Saudis entered the war on the side of the Allies, but never actually contributed to the war effort. After World War II, they entered the United Nations, and the U.S. formed Aramco alongside the Saudis, the Saudi-run oil company. In truth, while the U.S. wasn't actually that close to the Saudis, Aramco helped to push this idea of a close relationship between Saudi Arabia and the U.S. in order to justify sending thousands of Americans to a distant desert to pump oil. During the Cold War, U.S.-Saudi relations mainly revolved around access to oil and were occasionally strained over America's policy toward Israel. Relations soured when Saudi Arabia embargoed oil shipments to the United States and, along with OPEC, raised oil prices globally, sending the U.S. economy into a deep recession in the mid-1970s. In 1990, when Iraq invaded Kuwait, King Fahd and his brothers reluctantly invited the U.S. and international forces to protect Saudi Arabia and to push back Iraq. They worried that if not repelled, Saddam Hussein could turn his sights to their kingdom next. Saudi Arabia also fueled the coalition forces with gasoline and jet fuel and was a minor participant in the war. After the Gulf War, U.S. forces remained in Saudi Arabia to enforce the no-fly zones over Iraq. But Rick, I've got to tell you that I believe that at the end of the day, the most significant part of the relationship between the United States and the Saudis, that came in 1974. You see, back in 1973, the United States decoupled the US dollar from gold, thereby abandoning the so-called gold standard. Well, in 1974, a year later, the U.S. actually convinced the Saudis to begin selling all oil around the world in U.S. dollars, creating something known now as the petrodollar. And it is because of that special relationship that the U.S. and the Saudis have been pegged to each other, you might even say codependent on each other, ever since. For the News with Rick Sanchez, I'm Ben Swan.
Joining us now to talk about this is former British MP George Galloway. George, I want to start with the fact that this news, interestingly enough, was delivered not even by the President of the United States himself, but by Jen Psaki, the President's feisty female press secretary, for those of you who may not be familiar with her. How do you think that plays culturally, if nothing else, with the Crown Prince?
Well, it's a double slap in the face, the decision itself and the method by which it was announced. I'd like to think this was all because bin Salman murdered my friend, the Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi, and cut him into pieces and flushed him down a drain. But that's probably not the reason. You have adumbrated some of the more likely reasons. A wish to redo relations after Jared Kushner was run out of town. The Yemen issue, which is very much bin Salman's issue. He's the one that's driven that war. And as we discussed last night, Rick, the frosty relations, which are even now evident between President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu, as well as, and I add this one, it's a bit left field, a lot of very powerful and rich Saudis were shaken down, literally, by Prince bin Salman. They literally were hanged upside down until the money fell out of their pockets. They were exiled, put into jail, and a lot of those are players in the United States of America, especially the man who is the second most important owner of Fox News.
That's fascinating. By the way, when we speak of Saudi Arabia as a religious Mecca, because that's where Mecca is for the Muslim world, but it's also the personal gas station, as written by one New York Times columnist named Thomas Friedman. It is both the gas station for the United States and for the UK. How does the United States try and deal with this country and the UK, which is so important for them economically, without giving them too much import, thereby possibly affecting its relationship with other countries in that region?
Yes, but that's a fading asset that they have, because the world's using much less oil. We are finding oil ourselves. In your case, you have become probably the #1 energy producer in the world. We are less and less dependent on oil and less dependent on Saudi Arabia. In fact, until very recently, Venezuela was the biggest exporter of oil to the United States. So they once thought that they held all the cards, but those cards are being seen more and more, and therefore the hand that the royals in Saudi Arabia hold is that much less powerful.
Well, then, given the answer that you just gave me, I'm thinking to myself that maybe Mr. Kushner, Jared, and his father-in-law, Mr. Trump, may have given the Saudis more credit than they're actually due at this particular time geopolitically, based on your argument, right?
Yeah. It is, but what we don't know is what the Saudis gave them in return, and I don't mean only politically. The relationship was a deeply unhealthy one between the Trump family and this group of completely tyrannical dictators. If we were talking about a relationship with the North Korean regime, everyone would be clucking. Why is it more respectable to be in bed with and doing God knows what with the Saudi dictatorship, the hand choppers, head choppers, heart eaters. These are people who fund and are the fountainhead of Islamist extremism all over the world. It's very good that President Biden is recalibrating America's relationship with this regime. One point I might have made, Rick, is that it's going to be a little bit difficult talking to King Salman because he's very, very old, very, very sick, and it's not that clear how well he can speak at all.
Yeah, there's been reports that he's almost like well, not in a good way. 30 seconds left. Could you elaborate just a little bit on the point you made about the second number two over at Fox News and his relationship to the Saudis?
Yeah, Bin Talal is a very big player in Western media. He was, after Mr. Murdoch, the second most important shareholder in Fox News. He was in Sky News. He was one of the princes that was taken prisoner by Bin Salman and literally extorted out of billions of dollars. And there's 50 more princes where Bin Talal came from. He was extremely angry about that. And I expect that all of the Saudi Arabian princes have let the American administration know that they are not behind the crown prince.
Fascinating. I didn't know that that type of infighting existed and that it had a voice here in the United States. As usual, it's always great to have you, George. You know a lot. Thanks, my friend. Talk to you again soon.
Welcome.
This is The News with Rick Sanchez, and you're watching our special coverage. When we come back, North Korea in the news for hacking, cyber hacking. We're going to talk to that man right there. That's Todd Shipley. He's an expert on cyber hacking and cybersecurity, and I can't wait to hear what he has to say. Stay right there. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back. I'm Rick Sanchez. The protests, the clashes, the disruptions, the fires continue in Catalonia after a rapper was arrested. A story we covered for you here yesterday. Some 2,000 people rallying in Barcelona where they're being met with strong police presence. So it's a melee. Protesters set up barricades, set bins on fire, threw projectiles at the officers, and police are showing up. They say several people have been arrested. Who knows how long this thing is going to continue? Here is Evelina Kavchinka. She's reporting from the scene. Let's hear what she has to say.
People are starting to, they already started to protest yesterday, going out on the streets of Barcelona, and they want Pablo Hasél to be released. He basically was criticizing the Spanish crown in his songs, in his rap. There are a lot of teenagers protesting, mostly young people, and not just in Barcelona, but also in other cities in Catalonia, especially Lleida, where Pablo was kept in his university. He basically barricaded himself. And now he says that he just wanted the truth to come out, and he's very happy about it. They just put the streets on fire and the Plaza Catalunya, which is the main square in Barcelona, and the police are getting quite angry because it's the first protest since many months in Barcelona because of COVID, of course. Yesterday there was a woman who was injured. She's only 19 years old, and she got basically a bullet foam in her face. And now it seems like the protests are even bigger than yesterday, and they might continue for the next couple days. Catalans are famous for protesting and demand back their independence. The arrest of Pablo Hasél might have just been an excuse, because it's been months since Catalans were protesting. It's actually among whole Spain, like you said, the capital and other cities, other big cities in Spain, because people are actually also tired of all the restrictions of COVID. So they are using, different excuses, such as the arrest of Pablo, as basically also protesting that they want to, have a normal life again, go back to work.
Kachinska following that story for us. Maybe the best way to tell this next story is to draw a comparison to bank robberies. Bank robbers generally go into a bank, right? Usually with some type of weapon. They hand a bank teller a note, and then they walk out with the loot. At least that's the way we've always seen it. That's the way we've seen it on movies, etc. Well, apparently you can now rob a bank from the comfort of your own home, and the payoff is just as good as, well, maybe even better. Just ask the U.S. Department of Justice. It is now saying that 3 North Korean hackers heisted banknotes and cryptocurrencies in that very same way, and that they've made off with more than $1.3 billion. Here to discuss how they did this is cybersecurity expert Todd Shipley. Mr. Shipley, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Rick.
Anytime we talk about North Korea, we always have to wonder whether this is really more of a geopolitical story than it really is a crime story. But as far as you can tell, is this a legitimate crime hacking story? Did North Koreans really hack this $1.3 billion?
Well, I think you're right. It is more than just a hacking story, because I think if you look at what the U.S. Attorney's Office did in its indictment, it blatantly, in the first line, declared that the Democratic, Republic of Korea was a co-conspirator in this. So it definitely has a geopolitical, side to this. But at its base, it's just hacking. Now, keep in mind, this is just what the North Koreans are doing to fund their country. They, can't go on the world stage and sell anything. They don't have, market other than to China. And so their attempts at gaining funds is to go steal it from other people. And they've done it very successfully, according to this current indictment. But this is not the first indictment of North Koreans at all.
Is it, I know this is kind of a rudimentary question from somebody who knows nothing about hacking or even is able to get into their computer half the time. Just ask my kids. But how difficult is this stuff that they seem to be doing?
Well, for somebody with the talent and the skills, not very, because what they're doing is they're preying on people like you, particularly with the WannaCry, ransomware, and what they did initially with Sony. That's the basis of this initial indictment. The old Sony attack from 2014 is they sent malware to basic users like you, and you clicked on a link that actually didn't provide what you thought it was going to do. It provided malware to your computer that then allowed them to access that computer and spread more malware and access the servers and do more nefarious things. So it's very simple in some respects.
Pardon me, but I don't have access to that 1.3 billion. Are the people who have that access that vulnerable? Are they as dumb as I am?
Well, if you think about the fact that there's people that work in banks, and I send the same nefarious email to somebody within the bank, and they open it up, and the malware gets deployed in their bank, and then they use that to get to other systems within the bank, yes, it is that simple. They just simply use a piece of malware to start at one point and then gain access to other places within the bank and go from there. And in this case, they went to the ATMs. They were able to get into the ATMs and deploy malware in the ATMs, where they had the ATMs spitting out cash.
Is there a recourse for something like this?
Well, is the recourse better cybersecurity? Obviously, understanding that these things occur, training your employees about the
No. I don't mean,
associated.
you misunderstood me. I don't mean prevention. I mean recourse. I mean going over there and getting the money back or kicking somebody's butt for doing it. I don't know, putting them in jail, whatever.
Well, I think this is important, the fact that this administration, now keep in mind, this indictment spreads over 3 administrations, but the first line of the indictment names the North Koreans. So this is a shot across the bow to them. Also, one of the things that's listed in the indictment is a forfeiture order. They actually found some of the cryptocurrency related to these thefts being held by a company in New York City, and they're going after some of that. Most of it, though, I mean, they're not going to be able to get back. It's gone. And so these companies, the hundreds of millions of dollars that they stole from some of the banks all over the world, Bangladesh, Africa, Mexico, they were not just stealing from the United States. They were stealing from anybody and everybody they could, but they're not going to get that money back. And there's little recourse unless we decide to go against them somehow militarily.
And down to the 30 seconds, but those 3 hackers that are apparently named, who are they, where are they, and are we going to ever get those guys behind bars?
Well, the indictment names and actually put pictures in the indictment, which was kind of interesting in the press release. Also are the pictures of Park and the other co-conspirators, but they're sitting in North Korea, and we're never going to catch them. We know that, according to the indictment, they were traveling to Russia and China, but they're not going to go someplace that we're going to be able to get them in anytime soon because they know they'll be arrested. So
That's
it's
amazing.
not going to happen.
Yeah, so fait accompli. I mean, there you have it.
Yeah.
They did it, and they'll probably do it again. Wow, you really know
they're
your
doing
stuff.
it right now.
And they're doing it right now. Hope you know what I'm going to do? Just to be sure, I'm going to shut down my computer just in case. Mr. Shipley, you're a delight. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. Thanks so much for being with us. I'm Rick Sanchez. We'll see you again soon. And as we like to say, let the good news be yours.